As you can see, we're going to be doing a fireside chat. We are going to turn the fireplace off, though, when the commissioner and senior deputy are up here, because we don't want it to get too warm up here. So we're gonna turn that down. But this is going to be an interesting way that we do this. And one of the interesting ways that we do this is I'm going to walk off stage for a minute, mainly because I forgot my script. So what we have is we have a series, we've worked on a series of questions that were generated from many superintendents from around the state. We asked different groups, different committees, the executive committee in particular, generated quite a few questions. And Phyllis is going to sit with the senior deputy and the commissioner and go over those. So first, I'd like to take this opportunity. First, I'm going to introduce our senior deputy, Dr. Baldwin, and ask him to come to the stage in a moment. Dr. James N. Baldwin is the Senior Deputy Commissioner for Education Policy. He has a long career in public service and education. Prior to joining the New York State Education Department this year, Jim was President and Chief Executive Officer at Excelsior College from 2016 to 2020. He was, this is the one that we all like. He was the district superintendent at Questar 3 BOCES for 13 years and did a lot of searches for the superintendent position. Before that, he was a counsel for the New York State Assembly and was the Executive Deputy Secretary of State for New York State for over 12 years. He was a member of the East Greenbush Central School District Board of Education, and he served 2 terms doing that. Jim holds a Juris Doctor from Albany Law School, a Doctor of Education Administration from Columbia University Teachers College, and a Bachelor of Arts degree from Union College. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. James Baldwin. Jim? Now it is my pleasure to introduce the Commissioner. Dr. Betty A. Rosa is the Commissioner of Education and President of the University of the State of New York. The Board of Regents unanimously appointed Dr. Rosa as permanent commissioner, the first Latina to serve in that position on February 8th, 2021. Prior to serving as commissioner and interim commissioner, she served as chancellor and member of the Board of Regents. Dr. Rosa was elected by her Board of Regents colleagues as chancellor in March of 2016 and re-elected for a second term in 2019. She was first elected to the Board of Regents for a 5-year term in 2008 as a regent for the 12th Judicial District, which is Bronx County. Then re-elected to a second term in 2013 and a third term in 2018. Dr. Rosa is nationally recognized as an education leader. She received her master's and doctorate in education in administration planning and social policy from Harvard University. She also holds 2 Masters of Science degrees in education, one in administration and supervision, the other in bilingual education from City College of New York and Lehman College, respectively, and a BA in psychology from the City College of New York. She has more than 30 years of instructional and administrative experience with an expertise in inclusive education, cooperative teaching models, and those are the things that we need right now more of. Dr. Rosa was a teacher, a principal, a superintendent, and a senior superintendent. And most importantly, this is how I'm going to introduce her. She was the first state official who challenged our former governor in a way that our former governor was not used to being challenged, because she knew she was doing the right thing. And as superintendents, I got to tell you, I couldn't thank her enough for what she did when the state education department came out with information that our State Department of Health decided not to come out with. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you our Commissioner, Dr. Betty Rosa.
morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Good morning, Deputy
morning.
Commissioner. We're so very happy to have you here. And I have to just say, this session generally is one that we really lose some audience members because people do rush back to their districts. So the fact that this room is filled, Commissioner, is to your credit. I'm sure they're here to meet you and to get to know you. So that's an honor, and take it as a positive. But that's from the bottom of our heart. Thank you for being here. Glad you're able to spend this time with us.
Thank you.
So I want to begin. Since I got to know you, Commissioner, you've been emphatic about wanting to change the narrative about the role of SED, especially as it relates and intertwines with superintendents and what we do. And as Chuck already said, we know very well how both of you know what it's like to be in our seats. But NISCUS in particular has had quite a few initiatives over the past number of years. Of course, our Commission on Diversity and Inclusivity, our Women's Initiative. We have an extensive coaching program, targeted PD for our superintendents, wellness programs, among many others. How might you see SED and NISCUS intersecting on those and possible ways that you can support us, not only on those initiatives, but perhaps others we haven't even thought about yet?
Sure. So let me start by saying, your question was, how can we support NISCUS? And I have to, I'm going to flip that around and say that NISCUS constantly supports our work. I think the voices of the superintendents, from whether it's rural, urban, suburban, the big four plus New York City, it's always the my personal understanding, as well as our staff. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to our staff. For the that whatever work we do, we rely on the voices, the individuals that do this from a practical perspective. And NISCUS is always ready to not only lend their voices, but also take a look at the direction we're going and weigh in. And sometimes some of the conversations are the kinds of conversations we need to have. They're courageous. They're the kinds of conversations that, you know, as my staff often hears me say, look down, is it going to be a broken leg, or you're never coming back, you know? So some of those conversations really truly allow us to create those intersections, to also represent the interest of the universe of different areas of our state. And for that, we're extremely grateful. The conversations are very concrete. They're very specific. Chuck usually says, let me get back and talk to our members. And so your voices are very, very much a part of what gets shared with us. And there's always the opportunity to engage in issues with our legislators together, but specifically making sure that we are always there to say, as we would say, presente.
So speaking of listening to our voices, I think a perfect example of that was the whole issue about remote instruction. You heard from us, you reached out to us, you knew how we were struggling and potentially struggling with that in our districts. So a big thank you to both of you for not making a blanket mandate for the entire state to provide remote instruction. So our question now, in addition to thanking you for doing that a few months ago, has that position in any way changed, or is there something we need to know, or anything superintendents might need to be aware of in the future?
Our position, as articulated on July 29th in the memorandum from the Commissioner, remains in place. We feel that, given the experience to date, what we attempted to do in that statement was to make it clear that we wanted students welcomed back into their learning environments. But we also recognize that, given the experience with COVID, given the investments that have been made in terms of the technology platform, that many districts were looking to experiment with that platform. We're looking for opportunities to expand services to students through that platform. Many of them discovered that platform made it easier for them to interact with each other and with their communities. And what we wanted to do is to accommodate that. I think if you look at the intention behind that July 29th memo, it reflects the charge that the commissioner has given to me and given to the department, that we want to be partners with our school districts. Our responsibility, while we have regulatory responsibilities, is to support the work that happens in the field. And while we may have to create guardrails within which we all function, we believe that the important work happens in the school districts, in the school buildings, in the classroom, and it is the direction that we've received from the Commissioner and the Board of Regents that we be supportive of that work and that we encourage the kind of innovation that we're seeing in some of our districts as they implement and as they utilize that technology platform.
Thank you for that. We all know how important the issue around diversity, equity, and inclusivity is, has been, and will continue to be. Can you tell us a little bit how the State Education Department, and yourself in particular, how you see yourself as supporting superintendents and facilitating these efforts, and in particular, perhaps, what, from your vision, does it look like in schools and in classrooms?
Sure. So first of all, I'm going to start with a statement that Henry Kissinger said: the task of leading is to get people from where they are to where they have not been. And so I think DEI, in not only in terms of conceptually values, looking at it, looking at the concept of we're a better world when we think about being inclusive. We're a better world, our values, when we think about the idea of equity. And when we think about the idea that not only diversity, inclusive, and equity, but when we believe in our core that that is the kind of society, the kind of system that we really commit to. And so for all of us in looking at the work, and by the way, I do want to acknowledge right up front that this work that this organization was already doing. So you were absolutely invested. You had made a commitment. You had people within the organization that were really looking at how do we make our systems, our districts, our communities better, and better than we have found them. But also more importantly, how do we move past what I call the single story? How do we get the faces, voices, and understanding that we're in this together, and that if we in fact are in this together, that we really truly have to be mindful of the expectations. So when, and I have to acknowledge, when we started this work under Judith Johnson, looking at the research work, and a lot of this was really her inner core of who she was as a leader, but more importantly, as an individual, as a human being. And those values were at the table immediately, and we realized the importance of starting to think about equity, and she was an equity warrior. And so with that, we went into looking at a framework, looking at a policy, and obviously with that policy there are expectations. And I dare to say that all of you have really embraced, you know, getting beat up is, we all know, is part of getting to a better place, right? We know that this is, change isn't easy for communities and individuals. I think you've been so elegant about this work, and you've embraced it, you've believed in it, you've gone out of your way to truly advocate. And along the lines, we've lost some people as a result of it, and we have to acknowledge that while that's very difficult, it is truly remarkable that all of you continue to do this work and to do it with fidelity and passion and compassion.
And I think that, you know, for some there's an expectation that there's a DEI curriculum or that there's some document that we're going to hand down. I like to think of this as creating a way of being, a way of existing, a culture in our schools. And again, I think if you look at the approach that the board and the commissioner took with the DEI policy statement, it creates an expectation that local school districts will have a policy, but it does not direct what that policy ought to be. There is in that policy statement an inherent recognition that we have hundreds of school districts representing hundreds of communities in New York State, that they are all in different places. And this is not about compliance. It is about doing the thoughtful and the deliberate and the difficult work of exploring yourself, exploring your school district, exploring and thinking about how what we do is impacting our students and our communities. If you read that policy, what it invites all of us to do is to think about the kinds of cultures that we want to create and the kinds of learning environments that we want to create for our students, where we welcome them regardless of who they are and where they come from. We provide them with equitable opportunities. We explore our policies and our practices to ensure that they are not overtly or inadvertently creating situations of inequity. And ultimately, we see diversity as an asset. And that is what our culturally responsive and sustaining education program is about. It's what the work that we're doing through the MBK program is about. It's about the work that we're doing with NISCUS, with the other stakeholder groups, is about. The focal point is diversity, equity, and inclusion to create the kind of school cultures that our students will thrive in. And it's about providing you with the best possible service we can with the resources that have been made available to us.
Phyllis, before you go on, because this is about you, we had a conversation, and I jotted it down during the summer when we were having, actually, you called out saying, we're really being challenged, right, on this issue. And I remember thinking how there was something you said, which was, when something is important enough, do it even if the odds are not in your favor, because you believe in it. And part of it was design the plan. Do not let someone else do it for you. And to me, that was, you were speaking not only for your colleagues, not only as a future president, but I think you were also speaking from a position of power and strength, that if you believe, if this is your core, you do it sometimes, even if that's the hill you die on. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I would also tell you, thank you. I'll add one more thing to that. So you know we've been doing this work through NISCUS for a past number of years, but anyone in this audience who was here from the beginning of this conference, when we think about equity and diversity, right, it's going to come down to 3 words for all of us. All means all. Right. We got that message this weekend, right? And we will live by that. So another topic that sort of took a little bit of a backseat because of COVID was the work around high school graduation measures and expectations. And we were very excited about starting that conversation. We had a number of sessions over the course of this weekend focused on moving forward and thinking forward, and how right now the system we're in does not match that thinking. I know you know that and understand that. So given that we had to take a little bit of a pause, can you help us understand where we are now with that conversation, where you see it going?
Sure. Our P12 deputy is here, Kim Wilkins, and Kim. Kim has been driving grad measures. We held 17 meetings in, I think, 7 or 8 regions of the state before those meetings were halted because of the pandemic. One of the questions relates to, has the pandemic changed our perspective? It hasn't changed our desire to get the grad measures work done. It has changed the way we're going to go about doing it. The remaining meetings will begin November, December of this year. They will be virtual meetings. They will not be duplicating the meetings that were previously held. We have been assured by West Ed, who we're working with on this project, that that will in no way reflect negatively on the product. We expect that sometime in the next year, West Ed and the department will come together. We'll pull together the information that's been collected over the last couple of years. We will present that information to the Board of Regents at that time. There will be a Blue Ribbon Commission convened. That commission will do its work through 22 and 23. We would expect that sometime in 24, the commission will be making recommendations to the Board of Regents on grad measures. Obviously, as we go through that process, there will be additional opportunities for NISCUS and others to be engaged in the conversation. Did I get it right, Kim? And I also was told to tell you that this is not about ending or replacing Regents exams. It's a conversation about grad measures. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you for that, and thank you for being so specific as well. That's very helpful. So another conversation we've had over these last couple of days focused on the area of teacher shortages. And actually, we were in a couple of breakout sessions with some of your staff members, Chris and Alex, and they were terrifically responsive in hearing our concerns and actually getting some of our ideas that we talked about. And in some ways, hopeful that there might be some changes down the line, knowing that there can be short-term and long-term goals with that as well. Can you fill us in a little bit about what your current thinking is in that area?
Sure. So before I do, let me contextualize the fact that one of the changes that we're making, we are the department is going through a process of taking stock. We're taking this opportunity to think about our priorities and what are our anchors. And so most of you have been hearing a little bit of this, and they're just two basic anchors that we're using right now. And a lot of times when I look out the window, I see the pillars in front of our building. And I often think about how those pillars hold and ground, create the strength and the ability to fight the strains that sometimes are put on any building, and the fact that you have to have a strong foundation. So with the concept of the anchors and the pillars, there are obviously DEI is one of those. The second one is customer service, and the way we're looking at this is customer service P20. Looking at it, that's why the teacher piece comes in here, looking at it recruitment, looking at it from the perspective of all the aspects that touch the lives of children, from everything from the academic, the social, emotional, mental health services, Kathleen DiCataldo, to the fact that everything we do, We have to do it not because it's compliance, but because it is the right thing to do, to support teachers, to support leaders, to support communities, to support our children. So our emphasis on restructuring the P20 process is to look across all the things that impact your work and to make sure that what we do is we clear the path for you to do a better job. And so our customer service has to be responsive to you, to your needs, and to make sure that you can get on that superhighway and you can innovate and you can really create the best opportunities, the best path for your students, because we provide the opportunity for you to do that work. And with that, I'll turn it to.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I think if we consider the work that the department has done with NISCUS and our other stakeholder groups throughout the pandemic, it has really, in many ways, created opportunities for us to think about some of the requirements that have been adopted over the years. If you look at how the department responded to the pandemic in terms of teacher certification, in terms of any number of different requirements that existed for individuals who were aspiring to teaching, aspiring to leadership, a high level of responsiveness, and a great deal of flexibility. I think what that taught us is that, yeah, we can be responsive and we can be flexible, and maybe we ought to revisit some of what we've required. I think if we look in particular, we talk about P20. I don't think there is a more significant issue when it comes to P20 than our teacher preparation, teacher certification, and the support that we provide to teachers once they are in the classroom. And, you know, to me, that is an area where the commissioner has extended an invitation to you and to our other stakeholders to help us transform the department in a way that can be more responsive to conditions in the field. It may be, when we look at the certification process, well-intentioned. Over the last 15 years or so, we have kind of layered on requirements. We have, based upon conditions that existed in the field, created certain exceptions to those requirements, and then exceptions to exceptions. So we have created an incredibly complex system of certification, and I think that is one area where we look forward to working with NISCUS, with NYSUT, with the other stakeholder groups, to think about our experience over the last year and a half or so, to learn from that experience, and to chart a new direction. It won't happen overnight, but it certainly has created, I think, the impetus and the energy that will drive us in that direction. You know, there are any number of other activities that the department engages in. You know, our curriculum office, our health and safety office, those are all areas that are designed to support the work of school districts. And we want to be engaged with you in conversations about how we can improve that. Our special education office, which is so critical to every school district and every school throughout the state of New York, and to the children that we serve and that you serve. There are opportunities for us in this invitation to have conversations about really charting the future of the State Education Department as an agency that provides service, and as an agency that is concerned about and helping you create the kinds of school climates that our children will flourish in. And it's no secret that I've been retired twice now. And the only reason I came back is because the commissioner gave me this opportunity to try to work with my colleagues at the department and to work with our colleagues in the field to bring P20 to fruition and to create and compose the department as a partner in support of what happens in the field.
Phyllis, if
So thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah. I asked him 3 times. The third time was the magical moment. I do want to say that one of the things that I think we've learned during this process is those interconnections. And those interconnections are so critical. It's not just interconnections of P20, but it's also the interconnections of the human interconnections are so important in this work. And to be able to reflect that, because it's one thing to say we want to be service-oriented. It's another thing for you to feel that, for you to see it, to have the evidence, to know that it is, in fact, what happens, for you to have those opportunities to share with us, you know what, there is a different way, there is a better way of looking at teacher development, teacher recruitment, teacher retention, and so forth and so on.
You know, something you both said, it just triggered something in my mind. And Commissioner, when you talked about the state ed building and the pillars, that is one impressive building. And I actually took my entire administrative team there a couple of years ago as a retreat to actually go there and walk through the halls. And they were in complete awe. And if anyone has not seen that department building, you must do that. Because at some point, at some time, many years ago, I don't know when the building was built, but someone said teaching and that profession is so important and majestic. It requires a building like that that's going to, you know, take it and guide it for the next however many years. That's a symbol. Mm-hmm. And it's a symbol of leadership, and it's a symbol of how important that profession is and should be and needs to continue to be. And that's what we really need to get back to, that sense of this is God's work, to use your words, right? This is God's work. So I just, as you were speaking, I couldn't help but think about that beautiful building and how impressive it really is. And it really is connected to that. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to switch just a bit to talk a little bit about you again, Commissioner, advocating on behalf of superintendents, as Chuck had already said. But we also know that SED isn't an executive agency, so you don't fall under the governor's direct control. So basically, how's that working for you?
Well, let's see. I'll start by saying that, in all honesty, it's one of those situations that you know, if you think about your own children and you know that they're truly independent when you go out with them and they pick up the tab, right? So they pay for the dinner and they pay with their money, not your money, not your credit card, right? I think the challenge we have had, one is on the financial side, because we still have the department knows that DOB still controls the purse strings. So, you know, we all know that when you have the control of the purse strings, that brings about conversations that sometimes are quite challenging. I love the idea that we don't, and you know, any governor out there, you just know it. I love the idea that our state, that the commissioner does not report to the governor. I really think that sense of independence, that sense that your work is tied to our work and is supposed to be independent of a lot of the political decisions that are made that are sometimes, as we know, are not necessarily in the best interest of all communities. So while it's been challenging, and I know some of you know that I've had to even say to colleagues, do your work, take responsibility for what you're supposed to do. I love the fact that our department is independent. I love to have independence of finance, and we're working on it. And I also think that it's so important to know that when we do this work, we have to do it being able to speak out, name it when we have to, and know that in naming it, we have to stand by our position in some of these challenging situations. So again, I would never want, I particularly love working with the regions. Again, having been the chancellor, it's been a little easier for me. But at the same time, I do think, and it's challenging, 17 members from different places with different ideas, but it makes it, that challenge makes it that much richer and gives different perspective to our work. So I would love to make sure that for centuries to come, that we retain our independence.
Thank you so much. Just a couple of quick last questions. One you actually already sort of alluded to, because you did take a big jump from chancellor to commissioner. So on a personal level, what inspired you to do that?
I think it had everything to do with being in the middle of the pandemic and knowing that we really needed to, it's kind of being on, it's one thing to be the at the control panel, right? When you're doing this work. It's another thing to be kind of behind the scenes trying to control the panel, right? And so I think the pandemic, along with other things, helped me to think that, I think back that I was the superintendent during 9/11. And that was probably one of the most challenging times in my life, having to deal with the entire county, the Bronx, as a superintendent, and keeping it steady, focusing on kids, knowing that while I had to remain balanced, healthy, I also needed to take care of many of the issues in the borough. So having had that experience kind of reminded me that I had that in my toolbox, and I had that in my background. And so what I wanted to see was, as a chancellor, a department that I love, that I've come to love the staff, and I've come to love the commitment and the work that they do, to keep it steady. And so the only way that I knew how to do that was to know that that the Regents would be in good hands with Chancellor Young, and that that I would then do the, not the policy, but the practice of practical practice of every single day. I just want to add one other thing that came to mind as you were asking me the question, was that during that period of time also, the one thing that kept coming, and by the way, it was a major sacrifice because I moved to Albany, and I moved at a time that I didn't even, see the apartment. I had people helping me. I moved 2 miles from the office. But I think it's one of those moments that we all know as leaders that you have to step in and lead. And so, given everything that was going on, I really felt, I was spending time up here as chancellor with the team and trying to kind of lead it from afar. And it was challenging and it was difficult. So for me, it was taking the reins, and my next hope is to give the reins over to somebody that will continue to do this good work, because that's what we do as leaders. We prepare the next person to come and do the next phase.
Well, thank you for that. And in conclusion, We started the conference by promising that people that were here with us would leave being reminded of why they do the work that they do and the joy that really comes with it, despite the fact that it is a ride of a lifetime, which means there's lots of ups, but there's also lots of downs. So with an opportunity for some final words, what would you add and to that conversation about the why and the joy of the superintendency?
Well, I'll take it back to my work as district superintendent. What I remember about it are the students, my conversations with career tech ed students who told me that before they got to career tech ed, they didn't feel like they belonged in school. They didn't really, they struggled to find their own sense of competence with academics. And the look on their faces when they described to me the fact that they could be successful in an academic environment that responded to their individual needs and their individual learning style. I would say this is a business about hope. When we think about the students who come to us, I recall a schools under registration review visit that we did in Brooklyn. It was an elementary school. And we were there very early in the morning. And we're watching parents from this community bring their kids to school. And just standing there watching them bring their treasures to school. It reminded me, and when I think about it, it reminds me of the responsibility that we have, but also the privilege that we have to be able to influence the lives of children, and by doing that in a positive way, changing the world because of their experiences in the schools and in the institutions that we're responsible for. So to me, this is a business about hope. And whether we have a pandemic, whether we have a fiscal crisis, whatever we have, it is the responsibility of the leadership of the educational community to maintain hope on an individual basis, and each of those children, in their parents, in their community, and in the state. So,
thank you for that, Commissioner.
Thank you. Well, two things for me. One is you said the word joy, and I think part of what we always live through is what we call enjoy. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, because I know he did say he had a phone call. I don't know if my son is in the audience. I can't.
He's in the overflow.
He's in the, okay, he's in the overflow. Well, my son was with me in my district while I was superintendent. He was a fifth grader at the time during 9/11, a fifth grader. And so, he's here with you today because one of the things, he went to Cornell for business. I'm trying to infuse the educational aspect into his life. And so it's always a reminder that it's about not only your kids, but taking care of other people's children as well. So that's for me, is being good stewards, shepherds of other people's children. And that is the joy of our work. The second thing is that I've always thought about, the idea that when we all face problems, right, and we go through things that are like stop signs, that we stop, but those are only, or bumps in the road. Those are only things that really slow us down for a moment in time, but we all make sure that we continue to our destination. And the other thing is that in terms of joy, that I always like to end with, winners never quit and quitters never win. So I know that this team right here, and by the way, my son, unfortunately, played baseball, was recruited by the Boston Red Sox, for those of you who are You can tell I'm such a Yankee fan. But the whole idea is that I think all of you remind your children and your personal children, as well as those other children that are your personal children as well. Because remember, all of you, and I know, I'm looking at Joanne, I know others, constantly talk about my children. And when you're talking about my children, they are your children in your schools, in your communities. And so I am proud to really be a part of your team and know that we are never going to quit, because this work is so important. So with that, thank you.
Thank you so very much. So very much. Deputy Commissioner Baldwin, Commissioner Rosa, Kent, thank you again so much for giving the time up to be with us this morning.